So, what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on plans to take 3 railways back into public ownership later this year. Seeing as the Transport Secretary has been in the job a matter of days, it just shows how little changes in government when ministers switch seats. But elsewhere in the world, things have been going a bit weird. And I thought this is going to affect things for quite a while in the news, I would have thought, internationally. And we probably could do with an explainer as to what's been going on in South Korea. Now, it was all kicking off when the president, who's called Yoon Suk Yeol, whose family is facing multiple corruption allegations, decided to call martial law. Darren, can you take us through this a bit? It hasn't worked, has it?
No, it hasn't. There were extraordinary scenes yesterday in South Korea. The current state of play is that the MPs have begun impeachment proceedings against the president, Yoon Suk Yeol, as you've just described. And what happened yesterday, a very dramatic day, they thwarted a move to impose martial law. It was described as a shock move in all the papers and TV. He said it was needed to protect the country from North Korea's communist forces and to eliminate the anti-state elements. And it was kind of seen as a response to pressures that he's been under domestically. And as you say, a series of scandals, a couple of which involve his wife. But what happened during a dramatic day was that MPs forced their way into National Assembly. They voted to block that decision. Some of them even broke through barricades to enter the building. And he was helped to climb over a wall. It was very, very dramatic. But the upshot of it all, he said he was reversing the martial law decision. And what the current situation is that MP is now going to vote on his impeachment in the coming days. And if they approve it, then he will face a trial at a constitutional court.
Oh, that won't be in any way a complete mess that lasts for months that we'll all have to enjoy. What do you think, everybody? Have you been watching anything in South Korea? Are you concerned about this? This is a country whose industry, really, a lot of our technical, the revolution that we are living through, it's dependent upon. A lot of it comes through or via is affected by South Korea. So if you're concerned about buying a new bit of tech in the New Year sales, think carefully. If they haven't made it already, they're not going to be. So what's happened is President Yoon has had his party's offices raided by prosecutors who were searching for evidence of alleged corruption by him and his family. His wife's been accused of accepting bribes. He's decided it's all the opposition party's fault. And not only that, but his opponents are working with their sworn enemies, North Korea, on the other side of the demilitarized zone. And that hence the excuse to bring in martial law and basically just boot them all into touch. Look really tough. Unsurprisingly, the Koreans were not buying it at all. They took to the streets. We've got some great footage, which I'm sure we'll probably be able to show you while I'm talking. This is a protest. Look at that. Almost we want to see that one again. A soldier is approaching a protester in a crowd who's filming him on his mobile phone. And then he's got his arm out, the soldier, and the protester, in a brilliant move, just look at that, grabs his arm, twists, turns, pushes him away like he's absolutely nothing, like he's swatting him with a fly. That's just a sign, I think, there's an awful lot of people in South Korea, firstly, who do national service. So they've got a lot of experience. They're not kind of, your messy sort of protesters that go out and just sort of line the road. They have a bit of ability about them. Secondly, there's a lot of self-defense and martial arts in that part of the world, and they do seem to know what they're doing, and they're better organized than they have been in other places. There's a lady wrestling with a man with a gun. I mean, they're really quite brave. They're not really scared of their soldiers. It looks in these clips down like the soldiers are kind of more scared of the people. The soldiers clearly weren't quite maybe aware of what they were supposed to do, how far they could go, what the sense in this was. They didn't seem very clear in their orders or instructions. They don't know if they're supposed to thump people or not. And the protesters are going, no, you're not. Get knotted. And as a woman in her, 30s or 40s, wrestling with a man who's pointing a gun in her face.
It's just extraordinary. Absolutely. And the irony of all of that is that there had been that concern, just watching some of the pictures yesterday and following some of the stuff put out by our defence and security editor, Chris Hughes, in the Mirror. There'd been that sense of apprehension among South Koreans, ordinary South Koreans, at the military being mobilized to kind of override the police authority. There'd been suggestions that the the country's military had suspended all parliamentary activity, and that they were going to suddenly be very authoritarian. But as you say, there are ordinary South Koreans, women fighting with guys with guns, and not being particularly perturbed by what had been declared or what the state of play quite literally was, but getting into faces. And you can only imagine the kind of anxiety that must be sweeping across the country right now, because nobody quite knows what's going to happen, how it could escalate. And what we have seen around the world, Suze, as you know, are various examples of autocrats misusing the system, whatever parliamentary system apparatus exists in their country, to be able to exert their own influence over the running of the country. And quite clearly, there is this big pushback in South Korea against that. But who knows how it's going to end, how it's going to escalate, what casualties there might be. I think this is going to get a little bit worse before it gets better. Yeah,
well, I suppose the American ambassador to South Korea has said he's taking some positives from it, which is that democracy has prevailed. And it's one of those things where if you're already running a tyranny, sending the soldiers onto the streets does quash some any sort of rebellion that you've got. But if you've previously been running a democracy and you send soldiers on the streets, it has an entirely different response to people.
Indeed. And as you were saying earlier, you described Yoon as a Trump-like figure. And that's some comparison, because as everybody knows, Trump has the capacity to wake up on any given day and do something quite unorthodox, which is, as we all know, a massive understatement. So even though there is that pronouncement that democracy has prevailed, for how long?
Yeah, exactly. And we've got that impeachment coming. We don't know if there's going to be elections at some point. Perhaps that antagonistic neighbour in the north will sort of seize an opportunity to cause trouble, maybe even invade. Tried that before. It's just another patch of turbulence in previously calm waters, which we didn't really need. President Yoon, could you not do this? It would be so much easier if you went quietly. The rest of the world would thank you, especially those bits of it that wish to buy a new iPad at some point in the future.